welcome to Leading for Life Stories Season 4. I'm Bob Judson, I'm the host for this podcast, and thank you very, very much indeed for joining me. Whether you're a new joiner or a seasoned listener, then I really hope you enjoy the mix of content that we provide. The personal stories, the thematic episodes, and of course the fantastic guest interviews. If you've been with me since the beginning, then I'm enormously grateful for your loyalty and thank you so much. If you're relatively new to the show, then I really hope you like it and I hope you find all of it interesting and some of it hopefully useful to you. Please subscribe on whichever channel it is you're using, whether it's YouTube, whether it's a podcast platform. That really helps us boost the show and get it over the hills on the algorithms. So if you can do that for me, I would be enormously grateful. But without further ado, let's go. Welcome back, everybody. My guest this week is Jon Parker. Jon is the founder and chief executive officer of Flyby Technology, which he'll talk extensively about in terms of what it does now. And it's really interesting at the cutting edge of where we're going with military warfare technology and drones in particular, unmanned technology. But before that, he was a military pilot, he was an airline pilot. He's had a fascinating career in the aviation sector. And we had a lovely conversation, as you'd expect, with a couple of pilots talking to each other. It was really good fun, and he's doing some stuff that I think you'll find very, very interesting. Not least because it's so much in the news these days when you think about drones and the change to defense as a result of what is happening in the Ukraine war with Russia. And so highly relevant and I hope highly interesting and maybe useful even to some of you as well if you haven't met Jon and want to connect up on this kind of angle, because he's a good man to know. But off we go. Jon, what a timely moment to have you on the podcast. I mean, we're going to get to all of that in a minute, I think, when we talk about what you do, but I'm so glad you joined. Thank you very much indeed. Really look forward to it. I think it'll be a fascinating conversation.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I've looked forward to it ever since the invitation. So thank you very much for having me on board.
No, the pleasure is mine. I mean, I think, let's just jump straight into it. You've got a fascinating career, both in the military, as did I, similar, I guess you must have been similar-ish timescale. I mean, maybe tell me that in a minute when you go through your run through, but you must have been around about the same sort of time as me. And and then obviously with what you're doing now with Flyby Technology, so and building all of that, and we'll talk about that in a much more detail. And anyone watching on video will get a clue because the background kind of gives it away in that sense. But just getting us started, can you give us a kind of summary of your career journey, as it were?
Yeah, well, I was brought up in the Midlands, born in the 60s, brought up in the 70s, not a lot of money around, certainly not in my family, and with aspirations to be a fighter pilot. The background wasn't quite aligned with that sort of trajectory. I was living in a mining village and a mining town, and the school was really an organ donor for the mines. So if you were a boy, you were going down the mines if you were in the B, C and D band. If you were in the A band, you might stand a chance of being in the offices. That's how it seemed to be to me. Not many people went to university. But when I was a very young kid, I watched the bombing of the Tui Canyon. An oil tanker off the Scilly Isles ran aground and started to spew oil into the sea, and it was killing our wildlife. And the RAF came and bombed it and didn't give it the final coup de grace. And so the Royal Navy came in with Buccaneers and Hunters and sank it. And little did I know I'd end up flying the exact same aeroplanes that I watched when I was, I think, 3, bombing the Tui Canyon.
Yeah, probably literally the same aeroplanes.
Yeah, it was. And some of them had the TC marking on them as well, not in the aeroplane, but in the 700s and things like this. You could see that they were historic aeroplanes. But I joined the Air Training Corps, as all of us seem to do, that end up as pilots. And I had a great experience in the Borough and the Eton Squadron. And I did everything. I really rinsed it for everything it was worth. I went on everything, volunteered for everything. That was a life lesson straight away. And I met a civilian instructor who worked for Rolls-Royce. And he comes back into my life later on after he had died, sadly. But we'll perhaps get on to that. But this chief instructor saw in me the ability to fly, and I ended up as a staff cadet at a gliding school, and as one of the air experience flights as well at Shawbury, and I was at Little Rissington doing gliding. But he was an engineer working for Rolls-Royce, and he wanted me to have a second string to my bow. And as every time I applied to the Royal Air Force, they flanned me, they shut the door in my face each time. Aeronautical engineering was my backup plan. So I went to Kingston to do the old Hawker Siddeley course at Kingston Polytechnic. And I was being sponsored by Martin Baker. So I was one of the designer guys going into the Martin Baker fold. But rather than draw ejection seats, I wanted to sit on them. So I applied to the Royal Air Force for the fourth and final time and got turned down again. But I wrote to them and said, right, that's it. I've had enough of this now. I'm going to the Navy. Bad luck. I'm off. And I got a letter back saying you start at Cranditz at Cranwell on the 5th of January, 1986.
What changed their mind? Was it literally the Navy letter?
No, it was me saying, look, I'm available now. Yeah, I'd applied for a university cadetship, and it turns out that, unbeknownst to me, they didn't give them to people at polytechnics. So I'd applied for something I couldn't be given, but they weren't telling me that. They were saying, no, on this occasion, you have not been successful for a cadetship. So I said, yeah, but I'm available now. And if by the way, you don't have me now, I'll be over the age limit in a year's time. And so I won't be applying again. I'll be going to the Navy, thanks. Little did I know that would come home to roost as well. So they accepted me there and then. So I think it was putting up the fight, and it actually ties in with another story that we'll perhaps get onto about Douglas Bader. I met him and I asked him for his advice, and his advice was never, ever, ever take no for an answer.
Good advice.
I've applied that ever since. So yeah. I joined the RAF. I was one of Walker's brats, the guys that he realized that the Berlin Wall was going to come down in a few years' time, and we needed to grow the Air Force. And I think we were taking 125 officers every 6 weeks, most of which were pilots, and the burn rate, the chop rate was horrendous. But he had decided that, kids that had gone through some trauma, that had overcome some difficulty or setback, that were capable of going to a grammar school in terms of intelligence, but were street fighter types, would be what would get us through again. And that's what got us through the Second World War, that sort of approach to fighter pilots. And so I was one of the first without degrees to come in for a while, and everybody on my course was the same.
What year was that then, John? When did you join?
I got accepted in 85 for a start date early 86.
Okay. Yeah, just a bit behind me then. So I joined in, bizarrely, this 28th of December 1980, I started at Cranwell, which is what an extraordinary day to start, and you kind of go, how, and funny old thing, I mean, it's symptomatic of the time, I suppose. We obviously thought naively that, well, at least we'll get to celebrate New Year. Well, not a bit of it. We had a bull night on New Year's Eve, an inspection at 7 o'clock on New Year's Day. We couldn't go off the base, and the only bar we could drink in shut at 11 o'clock. It was kind of welcome to the Air Force. It was just ridiculous. But, interesting. So, I very much recognize that timing because, of course, I was then, on the front line when the Berlin Wall came down eventually and stuff as well. So,
yeah, it was an interesting time. So I was getting the same marks as the first guy that got chopped. I was getting the same marks as the second, same marks as the third, same marks as the fourth. But I was working really hard and suddenly started to click. So I got a fast jet recommend out of Linton on Ouse, and that was a fabulous place to go through pilot training. With York right on the doorstep as a young man. Top Gun had just come out, so it was marvelous. And then I went to Valley and did pretty well at Valley. Really enjoyed flying the Hawk. The Hawk comes back into my story later again, of course. And then went to TAC Weapons at Brawdy, which is the School of Hard Knocks. And absolutely adored it. It was home for me. I loved it so much. Then I got posted to the Buccaneer, which posting night was a bit of a flop for me. I did not want to fly the Buccaneer at all. It was the bottom of my list. I think I had Canberra above Buccaneer
Oh wow.
on my wish list, and then three of us went. The three guys with single seat recommends went Buccaneer. So we thought, this is a bit dull, but we'll give it a go. And I drove up to Lossiemouth. It was just after the Lockerbie thing had happened. So I drove up to Lossiemouth. And as I was driving along the road between Elgin and the camp, there were dust devils, like dust waterspouts coming out of the ground. And soil was being blown across the road. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm further away from my girlfriend here than if I'd been posted to Germany.
Yeah,
And
and
it looked,
in those days, I remember it well because I mean, obviously, I went to the Jaguar, so I went to Lossiemouth to the conversion
yeah,
unit. I mean, you went past the "Welcome to Scotland" sign, and you were halfway there. You know, it was going from Sussex. I mean, it was kind of, oh my god, yeah, ridiculous.
that's right. It was a survival event, the Lockingdorp Road. Um, you were going to have to make sure you survived and you had survival kit in your car because you might find yourself out for the night. It was an interesting
Yeah,
experience.
yeah, it was pretty
I
remote.
loved it.
Yeah.
The best base I've ever been on, I think. But yeah, fabulous nonetheless. So two tours on the Buccaneer, fortunate lead on the Buccaneer, really enjoyed the aeroplane. Once I'd flown it, I realized the error of my ways. It was a spectacular jet. Awful to fly below 300 knots, above 300 knots. It was a dream. So fast, very little drag, and did a fabulous job and carried four seagulls. And what can't you do with four seagulls? In the
Mm.
maritime world, you own the world with that loadout. And six of us getting airborne with four each. There wasn't a lot that was going to stop us. So that was pretty amazing. We did all the overland stuff as well. So we did pretty much what the Tornado was doing, not as well, not being able to fly at night at low level overland. Um, that was obviously our restriction, but we could hit the target exactly the same time tolerances, same accuracies. We just couldn't do it at night or in really bad weather. So that's what the Tornado brought. But the aeroplane could carry more further. So we were in quite a great machine considering it was designed in the 50s. And there we were flying it in the mid 80s and wringing its neck. We really were getting every ounce of performance out of it.
Yeah, as one of my course buddies went to the Buccaneer as well. You probably know him, Mike Sullivan.
Yeah.
He was because we similar story really. I mean, we started a course at Linton with 18, we finished with 9. I mean, all of those 9 did make it to the fast jet front line. Unfortunately, one guy was killed on lightnings, but we did the kind of 8 weddings and a funeral routine where we were all stuck together.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mike had a good time on the Buccaneer, I think, and obviously because I was at Lossie, and then subsequently later on was at Larbrook, with obviously Buccaneers there as well with 15 and 16 squadron as they turned them over to Tornado. So yeah, saw it a lot, and they and worked with them. Always they could always rely on them to be pretty low.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Climbing stairs used to give me a nosebleed after flying that machine. Yeah. And we were encouraged to fly as low as possible, which you wouldn't see now in the Royal Air Force. It was a necessity though. The lower you were, the longer you were going to live.
Sure.
I lived that one through. So at the end of my time on Buccaneers, I was sent to the Tornado. I went to 27 Squadron, and I've flown both of my tours on 208. I got extended because of the Gulf War. I stayed on 208, which was great because it was a fabulous squadron. So it was 12 on the other side of the runway. But 208, you always remember your first squadron, and to extend on your first squadron is a fabulous opportunity because you know everybody and you know the job inside out. And so now you can perfect things. But then I went to the Tornado and went to 27 Squadron in the ground attack role, and then it became 12 Squadron for a second tour, and moved to Lossiemouth to do the maritime game. The aeroplane was a spaceship. Absolutely loved the aeroplane, but I just felt that we weren't listened to as aviators. They had their set ways of doing it. The aeroplane and knowing the aeroplane was more important than knowing the role, and that is nonsense.
Interesting.
Total nonsense. The role is what you're there for.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what you have
100%.
to understand. The jet is just the tool in your hands at the time to get the lid off and get a knee on the enemy's chest and a dagger at their throat. That's what the jet's for. It's not the be all and end all. It's the role that's important. And I think that was missed. I think that passed them by. That
I'm
subsequently
sure we could
changed.
have a separate conversation. Maybe we won't do it on the podcast, but separate about the personalities involved around that because that would be really interesting. But let's avoid the lawsuits. So
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
stay
But
away from.
it gave me some leadership pointers.
I'm sure. Yeah.
It gave me some interesting, like in our company now, we just will not have departments. But we'll come on to that, I'm sure, when we lift the lid on what we're doing. So after the tornado, obviously operational deployments, TLP, a maritime commander's course in Canada, which I managed to blag myself onto without anybody in the RAF knowing what I'd done. I applied for a maritime commander's course, and everybody thought it was the old HMS Dryad Maritime McQuaint, where you go down to Portsmouth and you'd sit there for 2 weeks and get told about what the Navy does. This was how to be a commander task group. And I was a flight lieutenant on the course, and everybody else was Commodore and above. So they thought I was the bagman for some senior RAF officer. And actually, I was on the course and came top, which was quite interesting. But that was because they didn't see rank, they saw capability. And I was lucky because I just brought a new dimension, which meant that I looked more radical, more exciting. And so I got the final lead, which of course gave me the opportunity to do better. So I really enjoyed that course. But Tornado, 2 tours came and went very quickly because of the operational tempo. And then went to Valley as a tactics instructor to start with on 208 Squadron, then did the QY course, then went to 74 Squadron as QY, and then went to 19 as a QY on the weapons instruction flight. Then ended up as the XO on 19 Squadron. Then I was the caretaker manager for a while between bosses, and did a good job there, apparently. And so I was given the tour of my choice, which never happens in the Royal Air Force.
You're right. That's pretty rare.
So, what would you like to do? I said, well, I wanted to go Lightnings. That's where I wanted to go when I first started. So I thought single seat air defense, I'll get that out of my system. So I volunteered for a single seat air defense exchange, knowing it was too soon for Typhoon. And Typhoon hadn't even been named Typhoon, I think, at that moment, but aeroplanes were going into Wharton to do the OEU stuff pretty shortly. And so I got a phone call from the poster saying, you've got your first choice. Oh, brilliant. Okay. Do I need to learn a language? And he said, oh, yeah, you're going to have to learn a language. So, okay, so it's not America, it's not F-18, it's not F-16, F-15. Dutch F-16s, no. Danish F-16s, no. Norway, no. French, Mirage 2000s, no. AMX, Italian, no. I'm running out of languages. And he said, Jack speak. Oh, the Navy. Sea Harrier, that's going to be brilliant. Yes, please. My dad was in the Navy when he was a young man and told me some great stories. And I love stories, as you're probably realizing.
That's pretty unusual, though, to go from your background into I mean, it's not particularly unusual to go from a tornado world, for example, to a single seat overseas exchange, but to go from that into the Navy would have been relatively unusual. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody doing that before.
Well, not from 2-seat mud moving.
Yeah.
Air Defenders, Lightning guys, and a couple of F3 guys had gone before me. But I think I was the first 2-seat mud mover to go Sea Harrier. But I was taking, a TLP course, behind me, and I'd led packages and such. So,
oh yeah, good for you. I mean, it's great. It's just unusual, as you say, to break down some of these things because I mean that's the Harrier Force was always, I mean, in the Air Force was always a bit of a law unto itself in terms of personalities and so on as well. There was always a lot of banter between the Jaguar and the Harrier, and and I'd imagine that Harrier to Sea Harrier they would have been quite interested in doing probably. Maybe not, but I'm just intrigued that they did that. But that's great.
Well, the Navy was very different to the RAF Harrier Force. I never served in the RAF Harrier Force. I met them a load of times. Obviously, highly capable guys, fabulous. The Sea Harrier was much more relaxed.
Mm.
Most of the pilots had flown helicopters before. They didn't have this expectation of brilliance. They just had to be brilliant.
Mm.
The ab initios had to come top of every course to even be considered for the course. The course was so expensive. I can't remember what the amount was. I think it was 7 million for a Sea Harrier course, because you leave the course a 4-ship leader ready for the boat.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
and it's a
Yeah,
year
yeah,
and a
yeah,
bit.
yeah. So it's
It's a year and a
totally
bit.
different
Yeah.
to doing a normal OCU and then a combat ready workup. Yeah.
There is no such thing. So you are Bambi. You come out of the box ready to fight. So that was really wonderful. So I did the course. The course was long for me because halfway through the course, the radar instructors got poached by Virgin. And they were on rolling extensions because the Navy couldn't grow the numbers. And so I arrived, did the first phase, which was all the VTOL, all the VIFI, nozzly stuff around the circuit, navigation, reconnaissance, those sort of roles, a little bit of air combat. And then you go on to the radar phase. And the radar phase is where the men and the boys get separated on that aeroplane.
I'm sure.
So you either fail at the hovery bit. So pretty early on, they'll get rid of you if you're not able to go around the boat. I should call it a ship, but we always used to call it a boat just to wind up the fish head. So even the fleet air arm called it the boat just to wind them up. But I did learn Jack speak so that I could out Jack speak the Jack. Because I didn't want to be one of these RAF guys that rejected all of the naval terminology. I wanted to
Yeah.
to absorb it and be the salty sea dog on the ship. So that was my strategy. I wanted to out Navy the Navy. So not that you could, but at least I tried. So then you go on to the radar phase, which was brutal, but the op phase is where it's at. And the op phase, you could launch as a pair, not knowing what the trip was. You'd be launched off the dummy deck at the Ovalton, go straight to a tanker, go and do a target somewhere on time, mountain stopwatch, then go to Spade Adam, run through Spade, go to the air combat maneuvering ranges, fight some F-15s, go back to the tanker, go and do some low level, get a hot retasking to do some CAS or something, back to the tanker. And you're leading as a pair, a composite sortie right at the end of your first OCU. So the ab initios, I mean, the
We're working hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you either failed at the hovering at the beginning of the course, or you failed right at the end. And of course, all the money's been spent, but they would fail you. They wouldn't let somebody go to the boat that wasn't Bambi. Yeah. So I really admired that. That was strength of character, but it meant that they always had a problem with getting people through the course. But the OCU was really, really cool. It was always well led. It was always well provisioned with aeroplanes and assets. And so that went very well. But what they didn't do was keep the pilots, because those 2 pilots that were doing the radar phase left, and they had to train up some new ones. So I went and did my licenses in the 3 months. I said, if you tell the RAF that there's a 3-month gap in my training, they'll send me to the Tornado or somewhere else, and I don't want to do that. So how about you keep quiet, I'll keep quiet, I'll come back in 3 months. And this shows how the Navy operates. And imagine this as an RAF authorizer supervisor. So this guy has been away from probably the most complex aeroplane other than the space shuttle, has come back after 3 months of not flying, and there is no simulator because the visuals are being redone, and there isn't a trainer, there isn't a T-bird because one's had a big bird strike, one's in deep maintenance, and something else had happened to the other one. I think one had crashed. So there's no trainer. So the answer was, John, you're going to fly in a lightweight fighter. You're off to you haven't had a brief on the radar yet. You'll get one. But we've got a task and we haven't got a jet for it. We haven't got a pilot for it, but you need to fly. So you'll have to do the task as well. You'll have to satisfy flight refueling, aviation. We have to go and do an intercept on them. But because you're not radar qualified, you have to stay 2,000 feet out in sanctuary rather than come down to, the no sanctuary sort of stuff. So I took a brief on the radar and I'm thinking, this is a spoof. There's no way they're going to
It
let
does
me.
sound like that, doesn't it? It
Yeah,
absolutely sounds like you're doing it.
And then somebody walks up with some targets for me and goes, "Oh, hit them and one of them on time, please." Okay, yeah, fine. So I draw up a map. And then somebody says, "Yeah, when you get back, do all of the VSTOL." So you want to see a mini circuit, a bit of rotating around the nozzles, stow hops from one place to another, do some rolling vertical landing stuff, just blow the cobwebs out. So they're putting you in the performance corners where the aeroplane hates to be. And this is my first trip back. So I think this is really quite amusing. So I sign for the jet and take it on charge, in fact, which makes it even more complex for the ground crew. I sign the auth sheets and everybody's treating me as if this is quite normal. Next thing I know, I'm at 40,000 feet on my way up through Wales to let down into low level to do the A5 pass and a couple of targets, and then go down to Cornwall to intercept an FRA Falcon.
So it wasn't a spoof at all. It was all.
It was not a spoof at all. And I was thinking, any time in the next 45 minutes, I'm going to be dead.
Yeah, blimey. That is just pretty punchy. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And when I walked onto the squadron, the senior pilot, Nick Richardson, said, "What was it like, JP?" An old shoe. And I said, "That was barking mad." He says, "Yeah, but did it all just come straight back?" I said, "Well, yeah, it did in effect." And he said, "Look, every day that goes by, it was going to get worse. There is no trainer on the horizon. There is no sim on the horizon. What we're going to do? We've got to get you through. The front line needs you. So sorry, pal. Blue water ops."
Yeah, it is. It's interesting, actually. Even if you look at, so obviously when I was on the Jaguar, we had two-seaters all the time, and all the squadrons had two-seaters, and you never really had that issue when you're doing supervisory checks. And when I was at Coningsby with Typhoon, we obviously had initially all two-seaters, and then we got single-seaters, and gradually built up the force. Not that long after I left, really. I mean, it is a few years after I left, but a good time ago now, they started saying, well, okay, do you know what? We're going to use these two-seaters for the stuff that's really difficult, and that doesn't include the convex under the airplane. So the first trip that people flew was in a single-seater, and they did the simulators and bits, and then fine, the simulators are better, but then just jumped in a single-seater and off they went. And of course F-35 same, right? No two-seater exists. So it's exactly that, and it's a bit of an eye-opening moment. I mean, the closest I came to that was flying the Hurricane, actually, on the Battle Memorial flight, which was that was pretty horrifying.
Yeah, but the Buccaneer, of course, was no two-sticker.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, you're right.
Got 24 tons of behemoth, and it was so difficult to taxi that they used to drag it to the end of the runway for you to strap in there. You had just one 90-degree turn as you went onto the runway because they didn't trust you not to just drive it through walls and stuff. So yeah.
Wow.
I'd imagine the Hurricane's a bit of a beast. I've heard a number of test pilots come back and say how an 18-year-old flew this is beyond.
Yeah, they were a handful. I mean, the Hurricane wasn't as bad as the baby Spitfires, but that's a whole other story we could talk about differently. But then when the Buccaneer, I remember when I was at Lossiemouth, actually, I can remember once where, I can't remember the pilot's name, you'll probably know him, where there was an emergency state 2 declared, and Buccaneer aircraft 1 POB, which for those listening and watching to the podcast who don't have one person on board in a 2-seat airplane, that kind of should never happen. So and then the navigator had ejected after they had a bird strike up off the very north of Scotland and was floating around in the water, and the pilot had recovered and flown back. And we watched this airplane come in with the ejection seat, there's a launch pole for the ejection seat stuck out the back of the cockpit, and the just one person in it. It was hilarious. Not for the navigator, I hasten to add. I think he was pretty chilly by the time they picked him up. But
yeah.
So what's the story then? But beyond that, you went obviously Sea Harriers, and how long did you stay, and what did you do, and was that the end of your time?
No, I did 2 tours on the Sea Harrier. I did 800 Naval Air Squadron, embarked aboard HMS Invincible and HMS Ark Royal. Every every cruise is not deployment on those things, of course. Um, then my daughter was born, so I left. I ran the AY course for a bit, which of course is the forerunner to Top Gun, because that was
Hmm.
modelled on the Royal Navy AY course.
Yeah, again, for those who are less familiar with all these banter that we're coming up with, air warfare instructor, the or air weapons instructor, I suppose, and the and qualified weapons instructor QY that you were talking about earlier on, and things as well.
Oh,
So
sorry, yes.
yeah, no, we live in an acronym-rich world, which was yeah, just translating for a few other people.
The air warfare instructor is quite interesting. It is a qualified weapons instructor, but with all of the naval warfare add-ons and how that integrates in with the anti surface warfare and subsurface warfare as well. You are, even as an air asset, fast air, you are integrated into the anti-submarine warfare picture at times. So it's understanding the whole of maritime warfare, which adds a lot of complexity to
Yeah,
your
yeah,
job.
interesting, really
So
interesting.
you've got to know the RAF QY qualified weapons instructor banter and everything about naval warfare, which is a very deep subject. So you are a very deep specialist when you've left the AY course.
And you managed to effectively you did two exchange tours then. If you did two
Yeah,
tours, so
yeah,
oh, well, that's pretty good going as well.
it was. Yeah. So I consider myself totally blessed to have been with the Navy. I often say to people I should have joined the Navy to start with, I think, but then I'd have been a one-trick pony, and as it is now, I've got all these types and
Yeah,
different roles and different jobs and a lot of operational experience,
exactly.
which I would
Fascinating.
never
I mean,
have had.
fascinating career. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody doing what you've done. That's amazing.
You And then my daughter was born, so you can't be a fighter pilot and a daddy. I couldn't anyway. Uh, Subsequently had a son as well, and so that was the right move for me. I'd done 18 years. I mean, it was time for the younger men to pull on the rope. And so I left, but very quickly I got called back to help design the aircraft carriers, Queen Elizabeth class, as aviation lead for integration of F-35 and Merlin. In fact, all aviation into the carrier design with others, great guys that we'd all served together. So it was quite a good little team that helped design the aviation. So we built the carriers around aviation rather than shoehorning aviation into a carrier design, which is the way to do it. Then I went and joined. Well, I'd already joined an airline. I got called back 4 days a week to do the carrier job. Then I was let slip into the airline world, and I flew the 767 and 75 for Britannia, which became Thomson Airways, which became TUI. I ended up as a captain on the 73, having done my command course in Germany with different documents and different operation, different destinations. A command course is like a QY course, it's abhorrent. Um, and there I am having to do it in a different place with different culture, different aeroplane. I had to type change. Um, and the first time I ever sat in a 737 next generation aircraft was flying 189 passengers from Hamburg to Rhodes. So that was gutsy.
Mm. Bet you didn't tell the passengers that though.
No, no, and I couldn't speak German, so they were never going to know. So, and I had to go around as well on that approach
Oh God.
because it was because I was flying in a German airline. I was 11 knots hot at 1,000 feet, and the rule was 10 knots at 1,000. And I went around, and the trainer said, "Why did you do that? You were so close." I said, "Yeah, so the rules don't matter then." And he said, "No, the rules matter." I said, "What are you arguing about then? If you want 11 knots, write 11 knots. If you want
Mm.
15, write 15. But you wrote 10." So I went around.
Yeah, yeah. Sure
And
enough.
he said, that's how you do it, John. That's exactly what you should say. Oh, okay. So it's all a test. Then I broke my neck in 2012. Lost the use of my left arm for quite a while. Couldn't fly
How did you
uh,
break it?
in a simulator.
What?
I know, it's embarrassing. I was in a simulator that shook and sort of fell off its jacks. And the other two guys just thought it was a mild shaking, but it broke my neck. I got a full and free control movements of my head. and in one of the corners, my neck broke. And I think possibly because of all the, fast jet flying and perhaps the discs between them weren't, the shock absorbers that they are in normal folks. Mine had all been squeezed of their water. So my, things were moving around in my neck and my neck broke. So I went for about 2 months, not really knowing, except my left arm had stopped working and I wasn't able to fly. I thought I'd got a trapped nerve in my back, went to the doctor and they did an x-ray and then showed me the x-ray, and I realized then that I was in serious trouble. But the airline was amazing. TUI is an amazing airline to work for, and they do the human compassionate bit exceedingly well. And so they said, look, we did this to you. We'll get you fit. And if we can't, then you can sue us. And I thought that was a really good deal.
Yeah.
At the time, I still wanted to fly. And so I had all these operations. Well, I had a big operation that got my left arm working. Then I had to have another few operations on my hands to get my fingers working. The nerves from one of my fingers are in my thumb. And I had to have a Kametz transfer, which means that the tendon that moves your wrist that way, this tendon here in this hand, it moves my thumb, not my hand. So that enabled me then to trim.
Right.
Without that, I couldn't sit in the left seat because the trimmer's on the left side of the yoke. So I had to have that done as well, because we'd forgotten about that bit. So then I went back to flying airliners, the 787. I became a training captain on the 787, did a lot of command courses. So that's where a lot of the leadership ideas came from, and certainly some of my mistakes, or rather I was able to realize that I'd been making mistakes. To teach this command course gets you to be very introspective and realize that, some things had not been right. And I was able to correct them. So I was lucky to be doing command courses, I felt. So I just got better.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that is very good in organizations. I mean, I often say it about the military, but the civil aviation is the same, where I think you get lots of these kind of training interventions that are really, really helpful. Whereas, in a lot of other bits of the corporate world, that's just not what happens. I mean, it's one of the reasons I do what I do, and because there's just a dearth in some places of leadership development. So if you are somewhere where it's good, it's really good news when they do that.
Yeah. But obviously the leadership style has to work for the organization, and the organization that I now run, the old Bimbrook model just wouldn't work. I mean,
yeah. No, you've got to adapt. I mean, you can't be one, as your words a minute ago, one trick pony about it. I mean, I think you definitely have to look at what's required here. Well, we'll get onto this, I'm sure, in a minute. But I'm talking about generations, things like that. You have to be flexible about it for sure. You can't just turn around and apply kind of hierarchical world stuff. But so airlines completed when?
3 years ago.
Okay.
I had a choice: grow, Flyby, and follow the purpose and the vision. That overtook me. Really, it wasn't because I thought I could make more money as running a business. That never came into it. I believed at the time when I agreed to leave TUI that the nation was racing with a blindfold on into a war. And my company, if it had the right attention and the right resource and the right leadership, could be part of the reason that we survive it as a nation. So I felt a purpose, and my entire life had been serving my nation, and I didn't see that was going to change just because I had an opportunity to make some cash.
So I want to come on and talk a bit more in detail about Flyby Technology, but were you building that while you were still in the airline then?
Well, when I broke my neck, I realized, hey, you are one small moment away from losing your ability to put bread on the table. So you need a second string to this bow, kid. I was an instructor, CFS examiner, and I set up a company doing drone pilot training. And that meant that I had a look around the corner way before drones were as important as they are now. We were in the business. We were bringing new human factors training, new resource, new ways of thinking. And also, I'd written a paper when I was at the Air Warfare Centre on drones in '96, before drones were a thing. And of course, you can imagine every senior officer wanted to shout at me because I was talking about getting rid of pilots. And, you know, senior officers were hoarse when I'd finished with them. Uh, I got the hairdryer treatment for, I think, every single air officer every time they saw me. But turns out I'd been right. And I was actually right in the timescales as well. I'd said, 2015 is when it's all going to start to change. And there'll be some event that triggers a migration to autonomous platforms. This was before AI, and autonomy wasn't really a thing, but software was software. It still is. No real difference. We just like to hype it a little. It's very fancy, but that's all it is still. And so I'd had almost an enlightening of where we needed to go. And then Vladdy the Baddie invaded Ukraine for the second time, and that was the trigger. We'd been building an aeroplane like that one behind me in Turkey. Now, the reason we were in Turkey is you can't fly in the UK. You can't fly anything above 25 kilos because nobody's got the ability to take any risk. Everybody thinks that they own the risk. And yet I was saying, I'll own the risk. You just give me the permission. I'll own the risk. That's what insurers are for. Oh, no, we can't do that. We'll be seen to have incited this. And for goodness sake. And it held back the industry. I'm sure those officers at the time would say that's not what it was, but it was. And why would a company like ours move to Turkey? Now, we were very lucky to have a great sponsor in Turkey who wanted our training, a guy called Camille, who we struck up an incredible friendship with. And we started looking at what the future of beyond visual line of sight flying would be, where you can fly an aircraft, for your listeners, you can fly an aircraft in one continent, but the pilot can be in the second continent, and you can hand over control of that aircraft to somebody in a third continent. That's what we were doing. And it was very similar to what Reaper was doing, not quite, a little more advanced in some areas, but certainly not as advanced in the majority of areas. So we were trailblazers at the time. But then the Rapid Capabilities Office saw a video I'd put on Facebook of our aircraft flying an underslung load on its third ever flight. We flew a 35 kilo underslung load, and the autopilot, with the behaviors that we gave it, was able to stop it swinging. And we flew around a university in Istanbul, landed, and the aim was to fly sweets to children in Syria, the Kurds, because I'd spent a bit of time in northern Iraq at Zakho. You perhaps know that story in that deployment. And so I've got an affinity with the Kurds, and so I wanted to send some sweeties to the kids, just brighten their day up, and that's why we'd planned that. But the Rapid Capabilities Office, which is a skunk works really, it's a rapid development incubator for new tech. The head of that, Commodore Jez Holmes, saw what we were doing and invited us home to explain ourselves.
So just so I'm clear, you started out in terms of drone pilot training, but then you migrated into actually platforms as well. Where did the platform development bit come from?
Well, the platforms came because the only alternative was Chinese platforms, and they were hopeless. We'd been working with a company called Skylift doing flying of chemotherapy to the Isle of Wight during COVID. And the airframe was Chinese, and it failed all the time. It had cracks in it. The engineering standards were rubbish, and we were Skylift was having to work very hard to keep the standard high and within the certification assumptions that we'd given to the CAA. And so I realized that we have to build our own. We're not going to be able to buy Chinese airframes. We're going to have to build our own airframes. And being an aeronautical engineer, it just seemed obvious that I better start getting some designs together. So then the Rapid Capabilities Office said, we've got an idea that Vladdy the Baddie might use certain surface-to-air missile systems in Badlands. Would you be able to go and jam them? And I said, well, if we're going all that way, I'll kill it. Don't, we're an attack company, we're not a defense company. I don't want to take its picture, I'll kill it. Oh, can you do that? Oh, I don't know. Let's find out. And so Annalisa Russell-Smith, who is our Chief Strategy Officer, we sent her on the hottest day of the year to Farnborough. And every girl likes shopping, but her shopping list was light attack missiles. So
unusual shopping list for anybody, really. Yeah.
yeah. So to their credit, General Dynamics UK invited her onto the stand, and when she said, I'm shopping for light attack missiles, they went, come with us, madam.
Here's one we prepared earlier.
And they showed her the release mechanism. It's a stores management system, really, but on it were three free fall weapons. And free fall, there is some utility in free fall weaponry, but you are exposing yourself in the release of it.
Sure.
But so we got an invitation to the team who were making it in Belfast, Thales Belfast. So we went over ostensibly to find the free fall lightweight multi-role missile. And Annalisa asked a fabulous question. What's the lead time for this lot? Oh, 18 months at least. Yeah, but how many have you got now for us to drop now? Oh, we haven't got any of those. So it was, what a waste of time. However, while they were talking, next to it was the LMM. And there was a damage mechanism demonstration of what amount of rolled homogenized armor it can go through. We can't talk about that, obviously, here.
Sure. Yeah.
But it was astonishing. And I said, I want one. In fact, I want two. And they said, yeah, but you can't have those. I said, yeah, I want one, and you're going to give them to me. And to their eternal credit, Thales said, okay, fine. You want one, you can have one. What do you need it for? Well, Rapid Capabilities Office wants us to do this. Okay, let's do it. So then I got on a phone call with an amazing guy at Thales. I'll name him James Keown. And it took us about 5 months to get a contract through. Would you believe, when there was an operational imperative, but that was pretty quick for MOD. And so I rang at the end of halfway through August, it was back end of August. I rang him up and I said, right, we're firing these missiles October. And he said, oh, that's great. It gives us a year and 2 months to prepare. No, mate, 6 weeks. Well, you haven't got an aeroplane. Yeah, you leave that with me. Get 2 missiles ready. So we went away and for 4 weeks designed, built, proved, tested to some degree the aircraft that you see behind me, and deployed it to Belfast for the integration of the missiles. When we got there, Thales were behaving like primes would and should, and were quite risk averse, etc. But they realized that this was an opportunity not to be. This was their chance to demonstrate true agility, a can-do attitude, a go-mindedness, and they demonstrated it beautifully. Of course, they challenged me on every single thing. And of course, I was getting crosser and crosser. But the end game was always getting closer. And eventually we fired. We had to delay 1 day for weather, but we were ready to fire on the day that we'd designated. And we'd even test flown the aeroplanes in the south bit of Northern Ireland, which caused a stir. But we fired 2 missiles, one as a static firing and one from a hover. If ever you see the video, or if you put it up, you'll see the aircraft on a chain. That was a risk mitigator, because if a missile armed aircraft goes downtown Northern Ireland, you've broken uh, um, the agreement.
Not a good thing anywhere, really, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
definitely,
there in
yeah.
particular, the Good Friday Agreement did not allow for that to happen. And there's a wire going in. That's not electrical power. That's the stop line for the firing of the missile. So if the aircraft's heading, its LOA was wrong, they could do a stop, 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 and interrupt the pilot, who wouldn't necessarily, standing it to the side, not know what the aircraft is actually pointing at. So we had lasers and things that were showing us the orientation of the aircraft, but in a command bunker next to the pilot that was flying the aircraft.
So tell us a bit about the aircraft itself then. I mean, most people, but I guess in normal public community, they very familiar with little drones, the kind of little camera drones you see all around the space. And clearly the RAF for some time has had much bigger drones, which, as you alluded to, Reaper and Predator, are the main ones, and the Protector now coming in obviously as well. But I mean, our big, lots of reconnaissance capability, but also an attack capability, but obviously they are also in their own right very expensive, complicated, difficult to use assets. Just tell us a bit more about what you're up to.
Well, we looked at the roles and the responsibilities that were needed to be performed. What is happening all the time is MOD and other defense organizations procure kit, and they procure it against a requirement. That requirement was probably written in isolation some time ago, and things have changed. So instead, we decided to regame the system. And it hasn't helped us, because we don't fit in to the normal jigsaw. Our piece that we have behind me is a very peculiar shape, and they don't know where to fit it, because we went after what is the requirement to satisfy a role and a responsibility, and what is it we can't do at the moment. Well, I asked the question of myself: would I, as the commander, send an F-35 to attack a petrols, oils, and lubricants dump 80 miles behind the lines? And the answer was, I wouldn't risk it. What else have I got? Typhoon. Nah, that's going to be overtasked anyway. Apache won't get there. Right. What is there? Well, whatever it is has to be attritable, almost expendable. But remember, expendable is really what your budget is. America views Reaper as expendable. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We would view it as exquisite and desirable. We want to keep hold of that. So it depends on the mission. And I know that our military has lost aircraft for the greater good, for the greater number, and they traded cost against outcome. So you've got to look at an outcomes-based operation, and that's what we went for. What is it that we want to be able to do, but we can't do? And that's battlefield air interdiction. And the reason that Ukraine went static was because Russia and Ukraine were able to support the front line with materiel. Nobody had won the air battle. It was never actually contested. And so the ability to move things to the front line is almost, or was until very recently, almost uninterrupted. And so the front line just got what it needed, and therefore it went static, and it was a meat grinder. And that's not what we want. If instead we can find the petrols, oils, and lubricants, we can find the ammunition storage, we can find the helicopter lager points, the repair shops for BMPs, etc., and we can rip them up. That's what we designed this aeroplane to do. But there is no requirement in MOD for that, because that role and responsibility has atrophied away, because we've been involved in policing operations, expeditionary warfare in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we have not been exercising the big muscles. Yeah, we've not been doing the general war reps.
Sure.
And so there's a hole in the system, and we designed this aeroplane as an open architecture aircraft that you can plug and play new stuff into, because nobody wants to spend, £500,000 on an aeroplane that 10 minutes after it's out on the pan, it's obsolete. So we have spent most of our design time not on the aeroplane, because the aeroplane means nothing to us. That's just today's news. What we need to have is the ability to iterate and innovate really fast at a time and a place of our choosing. So to exploit new technology, to integrate it into the aeroplane. Now, I've used the word, and I shouldn't have done, because we don't actually integrate anything. We only ever interface. Because that means if you integrate it, it becomes part of the design installation drawing. That means it's a problem with certification, yada, yada, yada. So what it's meant to us is we have to have a way of certifying the aeroplane at the speed of iteration of new kit. So traditionally, MODs have bought an aircraft and then 10 years later have a midlife update. The midlife update costs as much as the aircraft did. And then it continues in service for another 5 to 7 years before it's then replaced. So the aircraft has only been the reach for weapon of choice for its first year in service after final operational capability, and perhaps a year after midlife update. The rest of the time, your warfighters have got workarounds. Well, that's not what happens with our airplanes. So our aircraft are, we're on a program called Pyramid, which is an open architecture framework. We're pushing that framework to test how we can change an element of a system and quicker than when we designed the first iteration. And then we're taking out a whole layer of capability. Let's take comms. You know, that's the thing that's going to get challenged the most. Our ability to talk to the aeroplane in flight at range, that's what's going to be tested and challenged by an enemy. So how do we change the whole waveform generation of the aeroplane and add a new one and go flying straight away without having to go through a certification pain draw that slows us down and the risk aversion that goes with that? Now, to their credit, the MAA, we've started conversations at a very senior level with the MAA because we think we've got a way of doing it. It does require some strength from the decision makers, but not taking undue risk. The duty risk holder will still be me. So, but what's the price of failure? Not being able to do battlefield air interdiction. That is the price of failure. So we have to get this right.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, just for clarification as well, Military Airworthiness Authority obviously is the body that was created on the back of the Nimrod crash in Afghanistan, actually, in the investigation by Lord Justice Haddon Cave, which identified quite a lot of things that, to put it mildly, could be done better about certification and airworthiness and so on. So that's where that's all come from, which is a good thing. But it is, as you say, it's then about finding ways to navigate the system to get past the kind of levels of process and bureaucracy in some instances that are, whether it's industry or in the military, that are hamstringing some of the stuff we do. Airspace, you mentioned it, obviously having to fly in Turkey instead of flying in the UK because it's very difficult to fly big drones in the UK, and that's a real challenge. Mixing them up with manned airplanes versus unmanned airplanes, all those kind of things, I guess, the challenges you're facing day to day. I mean, how much does this thing weigh, the current iteration you've got?
Without weapons, 130 kilograms.
Yeah, so it's a chunky bit of kit, isn't it? It's not, yeah.
Oh, yeah. You wouldn't want it dropping on your foot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing where you've gone with it. And of course, I said at the beginning, I mean, the conversation could be more topical given where we are heading with defense, because I think there is obviously a need for defense in the round to evolve to address the different world that we now face. And I mean, and there's a money issue in there. There's a prioritization issue in terms of government expenditure in there. There's obviously the actual defense need bit, and a lot of that obviously was drawing lessons from places like Ukraine, etc. I mean, I just think it's a really interesting game. I mean, where do you see the direction of travel for this, for your company, but also more broadly? I mean, everyone's talking it up that, right, we're going to go autonomous this, autonomous that, hybrid this, hybrid that. I mean, I'm intrigued with someone who's at the absolute coalface of this. Get your crystal ball out and tell me what's happening in 10 years. What does the military look like?
Well, thankfully, that's not my part of ship. But what I will tell you is what others are doing, and therefore we must. So if you look at America, well, let's look at us first. You've just seen 5 billion added to the budget to be able to spend on autonomous systems. We haven't even defined what autonomous means yet. So stop. Half of the companies use autonomy when they actually mean autopilot. There's no autonomy in an autopilot. There's automatic flight. Autonomy is a completely different thing. So you've got to get the lexicon right. Now let's look at roles and responsibilities. Nobody's actually looking at what the future roles are going to be, and then look for how we plug the gaps between the traditional roles that must always be done and what the new ones might look like. And how do we get adjacent technologies to be shoehorned in? How do we start striking industrial strength into our industrial base in the UK? Now, we're an island nation. If you haven't got a supply chain that's generically homegrown, homespun on the home hearth, what you have in your inventory on the first day of war is the maximum amount of kit that you're ever going to have. And that is dumb thinking. We're still spending money on companies or with companies that are foreign, overseas companies, and we're buying from them. They're then going off to the investment markets, getting investment, and then coming and setting up in the UK because they think now they've sold 20 aeroplanes that they've got the eye to the main chance now that there's money. And what they're doing, it's like introducing the grey squirrel. It's pushing the red squirrel out, and we're the red squirrel. But we've got longer teeth. Yeah. So we're fine. So we're going to do a bit of pushing back. Now, if you look at these companies, let's look at countries instead. Look at America. It's just started a thing called drone dominance. Great word. We pick things like protector, soft words, soft wording. No, stop. We've got to prepare our nation for war. We can't do it by worrying about feelings. We've got to get going, and we should be having attack names. So they've gone drone dominance, no messing about. But they haven't bought kit. What they've done is they've looked for companies that could do it, prove that they can do it in small numbers, and then the money is to build the company, not to buy kit. So they're building an industrial base. And let's look at Germany. Germany's just upped its spend. It hasn't quite sorted out its constitution to be able to spend it in the right way yet. So what it's done, and it was the right move, it gave 1.3 billion euros. I think that was the number. Please don't quote me. But I'm just quoting myself, haven't I? Anyway.
You are on a public podcast as well. So
So that money was split between Helsing and Stark to grow their business ready to create the industrial base. We're still buying kit, and we're buying it from them because we don't have faith in the UK SME. But we're all they've got. When war happens and the raw material and the precious metals and some items of equipment are in short supply, they're not going to be sending that to their UK entity with UK as the two letters after its name to try and Britwash that company. They're going to hold on to those precious commodities for their own domestic supply because we would. Okay, look what happened in COVID with masks and vaccines.
Sure.
People were fighting each other for resource. So why are we growing these cuckoos that are pushing out the Brits? We need to do it the other way. Of course, buy things from them, but not in a way that if you could buy it from a British company, the same thing, or say, hey, we want this, build it for us, not run a competition. The competitions are set for the primes to win. And so when the primes win them, they then ring the SMEs and say, oh, we've just won this and we're going to use your aeroplane for it. That happened to us after the program Nix. And we said, no, enjoy your new problem, because you can't replace a bad helicopter. Well, it's nothing wrong with the AH-64E, brilliant helicopter, but for deep strike, not what you need. And so you can't replace it with a worse helicopter. And that's what we're trying to do. I think this thing is fundamentally flawed as a competition. Um, I think the thinking needs to change. What is the role? What is the performance of the aircraft that satisfies that role? Who can build that for us? JP, you can build this. Here's 20 million. Get the machines you need to build it with. Start a design. We'll pass the design. When we're happy that we're ready to go, then you give us 20 prototypes and off we go to the races. Oh, and your adjacent company, don't worry, you haven't won that one, but you're winning this one and you're winning this one. And we build the industrial base, because the breadth of the industrial base is what will win the war. In a general war, in a peer-on-peer adversary conflict, it's industry versus industry, not just warfighter versus warfighter. And we're not doing that industry bit. We're misreading the exam question completely.
Yeah, and you see that if you look back at the Second World War, it's classic, isn't it? Where you know a lot of bomber command's activity was bombing factories for exactly that reason, to degrade the industry, and clearly, factories we had building, whether it was ships or airplanes or armored vehicles or rifles or whatever it happened to be, that was their primary function. I mean, I think you'll have a view on this, and I'm interested in it because I'm probably wrong here, but the challenge I feel is out there at the moment is that companies, particularly big defense companies, have got very used to producing platforms that then they can sell to us, but then they can also export if they're UK platforms, and they want to export them elsewhere. But that's also true for other nations as well, of course. But the key thing is they want to produce stuff. Whereas actually one of the things that seems to be the need at the minute is the ability to rapidly produce stuff when you need it, and to the latest standard in terms of technology and all the rest of it, because that's clearly a huge issue with stuff stuck on the shelf that actually you're never going to use, or it's out of date before you even start. Am I miles off the market?
I think it's a great ambition, but it can't work for the following reasons. This happened with us. We were told, oh, we'd give you a contract for a few aircraft, and then in wartime you can build them for us. Well, I can't support a supply chain with the civilian market that doesn't exist. There is no civilian drone market.
No, sure. And that goes to the heart of, because I totally see that as a dilemma. So I recognize that what I'm suggesting is an idealistic position in some ways that is probably unachievable. And therefore it's, how do you actually square this circle?
Well, you use open architecture frameworks and constant spiral development. So you buy enough of the aeroplane that certain things aren't going to change, like the hardware on this aeroplane behind me. None of that is going to change because the airframe is the airframe. So you can build all the airframes, and you can build them with a rudimentary mission system, a working mission system. But as things become available, upgrade the airplane in service, and with the right certification pathway, it doesn't need an awful lot of flight test. Now, you need a lot of flight test at the beginning. And the flight test isn't there to prove the aircraft. The flight test is to prove the digital model of the aircraft. Because once you understand and trust the digital model, when you make changes inside the digital model, they can just go to the aircraft and off you go. But that does need a change in thinking. But that's what Program Pyramid is there to facilitate. I mean, I'm conscious of the fact that you want to talk about leadership, and to be able to manage all this needs a very different leadership style and a very different set of paradigms. Because if we try and operate like a prime, we will become a prime. And primes are great and they have their place, and you won't have a 6th gen fighter without a prime. Mm-hmm. You won't be able to get to anything like that. But our job is to create significant conventional combat mass. And we need to be able to iterate the innovation, be innovation-minded, go-minded, risk-takers, but with the right mitigations and the right experience behind it. And so it means that I've got to change my behaviors. I can't follow a corporate structure. It won't work for me. I've got a different set of problems than a prime has got, and I've certainly got a different set of problems than the military's got. So I need a completely new leadership format to be able to cope, if I'm to keep pace at all.
Yeah, really interesting. And that's you've done it for me. It was a beautiful segue. Thank you very much. I mean, it takes us into that leadership space, because we could talk about this a lot more. I mean, I think there's an awful lot of interest currently in autonomous vehicles and AI, and whether it's remotely piloted or whether it's actually properly autonomous, and whether it's making its own decisions, blah, blah, blah. There's all that sort of stuff. So maybe we need a part two here, John, I'm thinking.
I
But
think we do. I think there's
yeah,
a part two just in one element of that.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because it's such an interesting area, and I think, to be honest, such a poorly understood area. There's so much rhetoric about it that is out there at the minute that is. I mean, fine. I left the Air Force 11 years ago, and I've not done this kind of stuff since. So I'm, very much in the game of picking up what I know and what I'm then reading into it. You're obviously steeped in it, so let's park that. I think we will probably come back to that, because I think that'll be a great conversation. But dwell on that leadership theme you're on then. So what does that look like? I mean, in terms of changing the shape of the company, and I guess I'm interested in framing it a little bit first in terms of your own leadership experience, what you've seen. You mentioned obviously military leadership doesn't necessarily fit the corporate world at the moment, and I get that totally. I completely see that. I think that you can't have a completely hierarchical approach to anything these days. But and nor would I ever advocate that. But I'm interested in what you're doing that is changing the shape of the organization to make that work.
Right. So shape of the organization is one thing, but leadership is really the glue that's going to make this work. So in the RAF and Navy, I had superb leaders, absolute rocks. And I looked up to all of them in many ways, and I thought they were excellent individuals. When I joined the airline, I had an excellent manager. She was absolutely fabulous, tough, unyielding, but kind and compassionate, and made my life possible when I had a number of setbacks. And I learnt from both, and I tried to apply them. I sat down and looked at my pain points. And what was the exam question for me? It's, I've got to be able to create new technology. I've got to be able to innovate on older technologies, which means that I've got to have the right people. But if we have meetings about meetings, and there's a governance structure, and there's departments and all sorts of those drag on the system, they of course they add value, but is that value that valuable? And that's what I had to decide. So my decision was, I'm going to devolve my authority as the CEO and founder to everybody in the company. So whenever any decision is made, they make it knowing that I would have made that decision. Therefore, it's my authority. Which means that there's only two circumstances where that would break down. That's if they've acted negligently or recklessly.
Mm-hmm.
So we operate a just culture. So nobody has to refer up. And that's the key to innovation. So you don't have to ask permission to do something, just do it. If you believe it's right and you're doing it for the right reason, and your value is to give the warfighter the reach for weapon, and what you're doing is making that happen, you're going to get my support, regardless of whether you make a mistake or not. So I have to bake in mistakes. Mistakes are part of this, and some of them could be existential, but that's the risk we've got to take. We haven't got the time to perfect the decision-making model. We've got to get going, and we'll do it over time. But what that means is we can't now learn from our mistakes. Everybody has that as their process. They have meeting after meeting. Oh, why did that go wrong? Who's to blame? I'm not interested in the mistake. The mistake will always bring a good outcome at some point later. Instead, what we do in Flyby, we sit down at the end of every evolution. It could be a meeting with mod. It could be a flight. In fact, it always is a flight, or a whole day of operations, or how did we come across to the Secretary of State when he visited us at the USC last week? We will go through a process. What went well? Why did it go well? How do we do more of that? Who do we need to tell?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we tighten in terms of performance on everything we do. Everything we do improves us. When there's a mistake, we just step over it, because we all learn from our mistakes. It's a natural function. Different though is an aircraft accident, of course, or an incident or a safety concern. Then we go into that in fine detail, as indeed we should, because those systems are tried and tested. But that's the only place that we learn from our mistakes. The other thing that we do is we hire big hitters. So we don't stop them. We don't tell them how to do something. So, for instance, we have ex-Air Vice Marshal Rocky Rochelle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, senior officers, please forgive me, senior officers are very good at spending money. Making it, not so much.
Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
one of the challenges when you leave the service. You've had big budgets, but you've never done a P&L. Yeah, so it's
That's it.
get that totally.
But spending money in the right way is an art form.
Mm.
So when Rocky came to us, what do you need from me? The answer was, I need you to be Rocky. I need you to swing at the ball, and I'm expecting broken windows. That's normal.
No, well, you hired the right guy for that. He's
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so
Yeah.
he now feels completely empowered. Go and break some windows. Go and see what we can do. We're going to create a wave, and it's going to get to the edge, and then it's going to rebound, and we're going to see what the amplitude looks like when it comes back. We do the same with a lexicon. We invent a lexicon, and then when the Chief of the Defence Staff uses our lexicon, we know where we've got to in terms of penetrating the zeitgeist. So phrases that are now in common parlance, I'm not going to say what they are because people will then start to see what the next ones are. So we do invent a lexicon, and then we wait to listen for the ripples back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Really, really
now,
interesting.
So Rocky is now free to do what Rocky does. Yeah. And it means spending money, because he's the world's expert at spending money.
Everything you've said makes perfect sense and actually gels really well with the hiding home. I tend to talk quite a bit about mission command and applying that in the kind of civilian context quite a bit with, don't tell someone, how to do it, just tell them what you want to do. This is the outcome we're looking for. I'm going to give you some boundaries, and I might give you some quite tight boundaries depending on who you are. And I might give you some really loose boundaries depending on who you are in terms of skills, experience, trust.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And I'm just interested in how you get past the egg breaking stage, I suppose, because you must have quite a lot of people. I don't know how many people you're employing now. That'd be interesting to know. But I think you get into the point where people are actually comfortable with that, not automatically becoming risk averse because he doesn't really mean it, and also getting too risk happy by going, well, do you know what? It'll be fine. Have you had any of those kind of instances?
No, what we do, we're very careful in who we select. So we select innovators. So we have in the selection procedure, which is being designed by Andrew Neofitu, who's an ex-Sea Harrier pilot. He runs a wingman type company that gets people into airlines.
Right.
So he's designing our entry qualification, if you like, our process for joining Flyby, and in it is an innovation test. And everybody does these tests. It doesn't matter what you're coming in to do. You could be doing some accounting for us. You are still going to go through an innovation test. You're still going to go through a purpose, vision, and values key event life interview. You're still going to go through a technical. The technicians will have a slightly different weighting to the questions, but we're more interested in purpose, vision, and values and their ability to innovate than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now that means that there'll be some that just won't make the grade to even come in. So we're selecting for their ability to stand on their own 2 feet, to be strong enough to spit in my eye and tell me what an idiot I'm being. That's so important. If you're having a leader system, you've got to be able to accept that somebody's leading you now, and you're the CEO of the company, but you're being led right now, pal. And
it's one of those things. It's easy to say, but it is. It's harder for people to do. Yeah, for sure. So that's brilliant. Totally get it.
Anybody that you speak to from Flyby I hope will say to you, yeah, Jon will take criticism, and You can tell him when he's being an idiot. And he generally stops most of the time. Um, so, but we have a way of dealing with ourselves, and why do you think it's acceptable? And I learned that from one of the mistakes I made once. A very difficult question that I had to deal with once was from a first officer. I was a Cat C pilot, which meant that I could fly into the difficult places, and Funchal being one of them. And I was so comfortable going into Funchal. I went every Friday and every Monday. And downwind once, a first officer said, "Why do you think it's acceptable to be carrying this amount of speed at this airfield?" And I thought, wow, that is probably the most profound, most impactful question I've ever heard. And I thought, well, I'm totally comfortable, but he's not. And he's probably going to know something I don't. So let's start this whole thing again. So I blew through and went, right, we're going back to the hold and we're going to start this again. And this time I'm going to do it in a way that everybody's happy with. We're going to have a chat about this. And first thing I'm going to do is apologize, because I got into a groove as the leader and he led me. Yeah. So I learned from that, and that question, I use that now. So when if you're giving authority down to somebody and they say, we've got a question that they ask of us, I'm going to do this. They don't say, it's not passive ever, can I or should I, or what do you think? We don't allow that, so I'm off to do this. That's the cry for help, because we don't need them to say it in the first place. So the fact that somebody's saying it is the flag up the flagpole.
I want a bit of confidence. Yeah. Absolutely.
And we might say, well, that sounds cool. Or we might say, yeah, but have you thought of this? Or, oh, I'd counsel against that. Now there's an opportunity for a meeting. Because not everybody's happy. Why do you think it's acceptable to be going at this speed is what's just been said. So that moment downwind at Funchal sort of has come home to give me a tool that I can use to prevent foul ups.
It's a really nice example. And I always talk about highs and lows and stuff anyway. I mean, professional high point for you, right across your whole career, not just what you're doing now.
Realizing my dream, getting the letter from Biggin Hill. Bizarrely, that was probably the happiest point of my life. I mean,
that again, just for those that are not familiar, that's the letter that says, "Here you go, join the Air Force." That letter.
Yeah, that letter, because I'd wanted it since I was 3.
Sure.
So, and I'd achieved nothing by receiving a letter, but for some reason that was the
moment. Yeah. Well, it's another threshold, isn't it? You've got lots more beyond that, but I mean, it's a point in time.
It was where things were now in my control.
Yeah,
after that moment, now I'm in charge of the outcome.
What about professional low point then?
I'd say some of my time on the Tornado, because I was very frustrated. I'd come back from tactical leadership program with a load of great ideas. And when I got back to the squadron, it was, no, John, we do 40-second bow tie attacks with 1,000-pounders at night, TFR overland. That is our role. We do maritime, and that's what we do in the attack game. And I was wanting to do,
no new tricks, please.
Dive. Yeah, 3-dimensional attacks, which the aeroplane would have been beautifully staged for. I did a close air support TLP. So the Tornado is not built for close air support. At the time, the GR1 was not a close air support platform, but we wrung its neck and got every last bit of compute out of the aeroplane and every little bit of comms from it. And in the end, we were highly effective as a CAS platform coming out of that TLP. But did anybody want to know about it? No. So I learned that, and I've applied that in the company. Anybody can come to anybody with it. And we don't have departments, because departments fight. Departments compete with each other. And then it means they hold back another department. We haven't got the time for that nonsense. So this is Rocky's idea, to give absolutely credit. We have an engine room. So we don't have accounts and HR and all of that stuff. We have an engine room. We throw all of the OC bogs and drains, the GD flight stuff gets thrown straight into the engine room and it gets sorted. And the other thing that we do, which is interesting, is we have no time off and no leave. So if somebody needs to be in New Zealand for their sister's wedding, it's 6 weeks out, they're still going to need a holiday because, you need a holiday. That's not a holiday. That is trauma. So, and you would have burned up all of your holidays and need, extra besides. So we don't have a time off or a leave plan. We just count the number of days people have. And if, at Christmas, your kid's in a nativity play, you don't need the morning, you need the whole day, because your kid's going to have to tell you or ask you, how great was I really, daddy or mummy? And so, you need to be there for them for that whole day. It's not a morning job. So we don't do it that way. But if somebody at the end of 2 years, we look at, oh, these guys have
never here.
Taken too much,
then
we'll have one word with them. If it happens again, then they go to 28 days, and that's a permanent change, and it's irrevocable. It can never be appealed. It's forever, and that means that people don't, and they
don't take the mick.
Of it.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, those sort of novel ideas, I think, are absolutely tremendous when you can implement them like that and make it work. And if you've got the kind of workforce that is amenable to doing that and it's working, then why on earth not? I mean, it's a great, really great example.
Well, they have to be amenable. They don't have to work for us. This is how it is.
Yeah.
You don't have to work here. And if you don't like that, what else don't you like? We're here with a purpose, a single purpose, and that's to get our nation ready for war. The money will sort itself. It always does. I'm not worried about that. As long as there's enough to put bread on the table for every family, then we've done our job. But that weapon, when our warfighter reaches for it, it works, and it's the one they reached for. They went past others to get to ours. That's when we've done our job.
Nice. How many people have you actually got at the minute?
Well, we've got 35, but not all of them are full-time, but our growth plan is up to 300 within a year. The first phase of spending takes us to 85. Then it takes us to 300. Then we go to the States. We've got a final footprint around about 1,500 when we do the first 2 countries, and then it grows thereafter. The growth plan is set, and Annalisa has run our strategy so that we can hit all of those markers as we go through. So, but the problem will be selection of that many people with the right qualities. I'd sooner have a hole than a what.
Yeah, another sort of hole. Yeah, I think that was about to be the question I was going to ask you, actually, because I think that it's very interesting. And apropos nothing, I mean, we built our house. We were fortunate enough to, when my mum died, we had a lovely plot of land in a nice part of the world with a house that wasn't great, and we built the house. And it was a great opportunity that not many people get, and it was fantastic. The really interesting thing, well, lots of interesting things, but this particular one, we had a number of subcontractors who we found very early on in their lives, in terms of things they were doing. They were relatively new companies. We liked what they were doing, and we were really keen to kind of get them involved. And, kitchens and some electrical automation and things like that, those kind of areas. And watching them over time as they've grown and they've got bigger, try to stay in control of the level of customer service that they had when they were first there. And I suspect that challenge is as much internal as it is external in terms of managing the monster that is now there, and the kind of loose structure that you've highlighted, and the big trust. I mean, because some of the things you've talked about, there are very big trust relationships with the people, right? So keeping that, I really wish you luck. I mean, I hope that works for you, because I think it is undoubtedly a scaling challenge when you do that, to have the right kind of approach long term with people.
Cell division it's costly, but what's more important to us, agility is the important thing. So we're never going to be building a process. If a process isn't speeding something up, we don't do it.
Mm.
The processes have to wipe their own face.
Does it make the boat go faster? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
No, I
and
think
if
that really
if
is.
we have to put process in, then we'll cell divide and make the team smaller.
Mm, fascinating. What do you do in your life away from all of this then to keep yourself sane and your kind of rest
Well,
and relaxation?
yeah, I'm a single dad with two kids as well, which makes life interesting. Beekeeping. At the moment I don't have any hives. I used to have 60 hives.
Wow.
I never do anything by halves. You know, if I take up a hobby, I do it massively. I've got a marine tank as well. So instead of getting a small marine tank, I've got a 1500 litre behemoth. You know, it's um I tend to just do things to extremes, like paragliding as well. Until I broke my neck, I started paragliding, and then found myself in Montenegro and Nepal doing aerobatics in paragliders. And but I got to meet a load of nice people, and I started flying with steppe eagles and Egyptian vultures, and backpackers would pay to feed eagles in flight in the Himalayas. And that money that we got from these usually American female backpackers, we would take $150 and we'd use it to buy diclofenac, which is an anti-inflammatory that was killing the birds. So people in Nepal and India would give it to their cows because they're sacred and they want them, it's a status symbol to own one, and they want them to live as long as possible. So to get them over their arthritis, etc., they'd give them diclofenac, but then when they die, they're no longer sacred because the spirit has left. So now they're just a carcass and they're left at the
Yeah.
side of the road, and the birds come and pick them, and then they die within 24 hours because they take on the diclofenac and it kills their organs. So the money we spent going around all the vets in Nepal, buying all the diclofenac and giving them free of charge an alternative. So
Wow.
everybody won. So
Yeah, what
that's the
a
sort of
great
stuff.
initiative. That's amazing. That's
Yeah,
fantastic. You
yeah.
you are a man of many parts. That's for sure. I think it's extraordinary some of the stuff we've talked about there. I mean, just your military career is so diverse. Then what you're doing, the airline business as well. Then to doing what you're doing now with Flyby. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. There's two questions I always ask at the back end of these interviews. Both are sort of quickish, I suppose, but some of which can be, some people find more testing than others. What's the most memorable event of your professional life? Talked about your high point, but I mean, memorable event.
Memorable. Royal Navy. I'd arrived on HMS Invincible, and I'd flown one sortie the day after I arrived, and that sortie was to get airborne in a lightweight fighter to do dogfighting in the overhead, burn out the fuel, come back, go round the ship a few times, burn down to hover weight, come in and land, do my first deck landing. The next day was supposed to be rinse and repeat, and to do that probably 3 or 4 times, and then build up to the heavyweight fighter, which is bigger fuel tanks on it, more weight, and a refueling probe, etc. So the next day, our captain had picked a fight with the George Washington, and he'd sent a signal, "Are you looking at my pint?" Apparently, the two of them had gone on a course together, the captains of these two vessels. So they knew each other, and they decided to pick a fight and run their own exercise in the Mediterranean. And our captain went and hid in Libya, in the Gulf of Sirte. This is before Libya had collapsed, of course. So this was a bit of a provocative thing towards Libya. But at the same time, he didn't think that we were going to get tickled by the George Washington. But we launched a strike of our own in the early hours, and the tapes we'd sent them to show them that we'd got weapons on their deck, unmolested, which really upset them. And then they launched a strike. Now, before the strike, we didn't know that they were going to launch a strike. They didn't know that they knew where we were. So we were fat, dumb, and happy. And our captain wanted 4 aircraft on Alert 5. Normally you have 2 on Alert 5, but he wanted a 4-ship Alert 5. And normally on Alert 5, at the end of it, you get airborne. And then you can do the next hour and a half airborne while we bring up another pair of aircraft and another pair of pilots and get them up to Alert 5 status. It takes a while to get to Alert 5. it's called a deck cycle. You can exercise the deck cycle, but a force ship, when you've only got 8 aircraft, is going to bruise the deck cycle for any length of time. So our boss said, well, you and I, John, we'll just sit in the aeroplanes. 3 and 4 will launch at the end of the alert. We'll crew out. Somebody else can get in our aircraft. We don't break the deck cycle. We're never going to fly. We're never going to action an alert 5 force ship. Okay, then. And then later on this afternoon, when everybody's got bored with this, you and I will go and do some doggers in the overhead and we'll do your lightweight fighter stuff. Okay, fine, thank you. But I need you, because we've only got 8 pilots. In fact, we only had 6 pilots. I need you in a cockpit. Otherwise, the captain's going to throw his dummy out. So I was sitting in this aeroplane and I just got in it and started everything up. And they know when you're not doing the right thing. So I'd flashed up the radar, I'd done everything. I was listening to the telebrief. And then I can hear a raid starting to build. And I can see everybody's heads going down and they're all starting to type into their nav kit. And I better do the same then. So I type what I'm hearing. And then all of a sudden it starts Sea Harriers 123, 127, 126, 124, launch alert 5. And then the boss starts his engine and I have to start mine. And then we get airborne. And normally the pilot in the lead would, and it's not up launch. I've never done a pairs launch. I had to get my nose almost touching the jet ahead of me. So I'm sucking in all of his dirty air as he takes off. And anything that's on the deck goes straight down my engine, but it's an operational launch. And I'd never even heard of one, but I get taxied out. And it's the first time I've even seen this sort of thing. Nobody's ever briefed me on it. And then I'm expecting the boss to turn through 90 degrees and then do a 180 and come across the front. And I launch and then go into close and go round and then widen into the fight. And instead, he just gets airborne and starts the turn. And I'm now airborne with like 10 seconds behind. It's mental. And he's now in a turn at 100 feet. And I have to join on the inside of the turn at 100 feet. And he's pulling 4G.
Yeah,
so
nice.
this is A-level stuff. And then we have our fight with the Americans and we do really well. And then I say, all right, now I've got an hour's worth of fuel. But I didn't, when I was in the crew room, do any calculations on hover performance. So I'm in a jet that's heavier than I've ever flown off a carrier in probably 35 degrees of heat. I've no idea whether this thing's going to hover or what weight I have to dump down to hover.
Right.
And I can't talk to anybody about it. Because
just because of your com out?
Yeah, Navy doesn't do com.
Emission control.
So, yeah. So I just elect to burn down until there's 0 fuel and land with nothing. If it won't hover, then it's never going to hover.
Yeah.
So, that was my plan. So
that'd be quite memorable. I can see that.
That was stressful. And then afterwards, the boss said, "Yeah, well done." Oh, right. So this is normal behaviour in the Navy.
Yeah, exactly. Very kind of slightly different approach. Oh, brilliant. Hey, the very last question then, because you have been really calm with your time. What's the most difficult question you've ever been asked?
Do you, Jonathan George Parker, take so-and-so to be your wife? That was a tough one, but I did say yes.
That's a good job. That's generally a good plan if you're standing at a wedding. What about professional setting?
I felt the pressure. No, the hardest question, I think it's that one downwind. Why do you think it's acceptable to be putting us in this situation? And I thought that was really profound.
It's also a great testament to the kind of black box thinking, just culture, land, sort of world that the aviation industry, and I think military is also in that place, has created. I mean, that's really good. That people feel they can challenge. They've got that cross-cockpit gradient down sorted so that there isn't one. And they can put you under pressure. I think that's a very good sign. So it's pretty healthy.
Yeah, I felt that it was a healthy environment to fly in. It was very safe. Their risk was commercial. They took commercial risk. They didn't take any flying risk. The engineering standards were second to none. And we were backed up all the time. I don't think I spoke to a manager for 3 or 4 years at a time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jon, you have been, I mean, super interesting. I could have talked to you for hours, particularly on the drone stuff. I think the part two is definitely in my head as a plan, because I think,
All right.
not least because this is such a topical area, and I think it's the conversations around AI and automation and defense are very, very topical at the moment, and therefore, very interesting to lots of people. So I'm hugely grateful. Thank you very, very much indeed. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we haven't even scratched the surface of the autonomy piece and what we believe is the route of travel. And we don't care if others don't believe it. We're doing it anyway.
Yeah, nice. I'll be fascinated to hear that. Yeah, I wish you the very best of luck, and thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Bob. It's been a joy.
Not at all. Take care.
Cheers.
I really hope you've enjoyed this, what I thought was a fascinating conversation with Jon. It was really interesting guy, fascinating background, lots of amazing stories as to what he's done with his own flying career, but now the area he's moved into and what he's trying to achieve with what he's doing at Flyby. And I think that's just fantastic. So if you have enjoyed it, please share it, please push it around LinkedIn, please make sure you're commenting and liking, posting and reposting and following on various platforms, or subscribing on the platforms, depending on what you're watching or listening on. Because all of that helps, really makes a difference. If you're finding it valuable to be part of the podcast and listening to it, then as I've always said, please do think about that financial support angle. Go to patreon.com, do the either the supporter, the champion, or the patron link, and join up as a contributor to the show, because that will make a very big difference. Really helps me. And I'd be extremely grateful to you, even though it's a free show. I'm not expecting you to pay, but I'm really up for a bit of value return, and that'd be very much appreciated. Great to see you though, and hope you've enjoyed the show this time around, and hope you come back again. Speak soon. Bye.